Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. If you're a subscriber, welcome back. If this is the first video that you are watching of mine, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about my journey of becoming a CRNA. So we'll start from the semi-beginning. When I graduated high school, I really didn't have an idea of what I was going to do exactly. Healthcare jobs weren't really even on my radar. I thought I was going to be a photojournalist for like National Geographic or just some type of job where I could travel overseas, do journalism or photojournalism or something like that. But clearly my life took another direction. But so when I went to college, I didn't declare a major immediately. I kind of did classes that were related to political science. So I was taking like global issues and classes that related to political science because I was like, okay, well, this can kind of get me into like a news type of route. And I liked history and human rights and things like that. So I was like, okay, let me like take classes that are related to that. And then when I was in my sophomore year of college, I volunteered at a hospital that was really close to the university I was going to, and it was like a big trauma one hospital. So I volunteered in the emergency room there, and I thought it was really interesting. And so I started looking into the nursing profession. And also before that, my mom had recommended me going into nursing, but I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I was like, you're not a nurse. Like, we don't really know anyone who's a nurse. Like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna be a photojournalist. That was kind of my way of thinking. And it just wasn't something that I thought about doing. But so then when I volunteered at the hospital, I kind of started looking into healthcare fields. And one of the main ones I looked into is nursing, just because that's a well-known healthcare field. So I saw that not only could you become a nurse, but there was other avenues that you could take. You could become a nurse practitioner or a nurse midwife or a CRNA, which I'd never heard of. But I looked into it and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. But I also like the idea with nursing is that, okay, I can become a nurse and still work in healthcare, and there's a bunch of variety of jobs that nurses can have. And if I want to, I can eventually go back to school. I like the idea of not having to go back to school if 5 years later, I didn't want to do that anymore. So I was like, okay, well, that sounds pretty good. So my sophomore year of college, I really started, I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to do nursing, declared my major as nursing, and was just like, okay, now I have to work hard. Because originally I had been kind of coasting, my freshman year and half of my sophomore year, I kind of just coasted, did my best to do well, but I was like, okay, as long as I make a B, I'm good. So I made mostly A's and B's my freshman and sophomore year of college. But then I saw the GPA requirements for some of the nursing schools. Some of them were really high. Some of them were a 3.9 in the area I was at. So I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to go hard in the paint to make up for some of these B's that I've made. So all the rest of my sophomore year, I was studying hard. I made straight A's after I declared nursing as a major, because I was like, I need to work hard and get A's so I can get into any program that I want to get into. So when it came time to apply to programs, my GPA was higher. I think it was a 3.7 once I buckled down and started really studying hard and started making pretty much all A's in all my courses. But still, for some of the nursing programs I applied to, it still wasn't high enough, which was very frustrating, because I was like, oh, if only I knew my freshman year, I would have tried to pretty much make A's all throughout college. So if you are in college right now, go ahead and try your hardest in all your courses, because you never know what career you want to go into or what grad school you might want to go into. So just go ahead and try really hard right now, so you don't have to stress about it like I did, trying to make up for kind of slacking. But anyway, so I applied to some nursing schools. The main one that I wanted to go to, I didn't get into. The GPA requirement was ridiculous. It was a 3.9. You pretty much had to be on top of your game to get into that program. So I was really devastated about that, because I was like, ugh, I tried really hard and I still didn't get into this program. So I applied to another program and I ended up getting into that program, which was really good. Like, I liked the program. I met awesome friends in the program, so it worked out in the end. And then during my time in nursing school, the idea of becoming a CRNA was always in the back of my mind. So during nursing school, I studied hard to try to do as well as I possibly could, just because I was like, okay, if I want to go to CRNA school in the future, I need to have all my grades like on point. I need to be doing the best I can, so I don't have to struggle and rush and like make up for mistakes I made like I did when I was applying to nursing school. So I went to nursing school knowing like I may want to go back to grad school, so let me do as well as I possibly can. But even when I was in nursing school, the whole time I kind of kept an open mind, because I was like, okay, let me not get caught up on the idea of becoming a CRNA. I said, that's kind of like a long way down the road. Like, I still have to pass nursing school, pass the NCLEX, take the GRE, apply to school. It just seems so far off. So I was like, okay, I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind. I may want to go back to CRNA school, but I'm definitely not going to feel like that's my only route. So the whole time I was in nursing school, just because I had the idea of CRNA school in the back of my mind, I kind of did stuff to prepare myself in case I wanted to go to CRNA school. So one of the girls in my nursing school, her dad was a CRNA. And I remember her talking about it, and I was like, okay, perfect. Like, I don't have any connections to healthcare. So I need to ask her if her dad would let me shadow him for a day or two, just so I can actually see if I want to become a CRNA, like if this is actually something I legit want to do, and also I can put this on my resume in the future when I'm applying to school. So I always was thinking, okay, how can I set myself up to go to CRNA school if that is something I want to pursue? Let me take opportunities to shadow and research about CRNA just in case that is something I want to do. So when I shadowed the girl's dad, he really enjoyed the profession, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely something that I could see myself enjoying, I could see myself doing. This is definitely an avenue of nursing that I could take. So when I graduated nursing school, I graduated, I think, what was it, like a 3.79, and I think I made 2 Bs in nursing school, or 3 Bs, I can't remember. It's now been about almost 10 years since I graduated nursing school, but I'm pretty sure I only made like 2 or 3 Bs during nursing school. So my GPA graduating nursing school was like a 3.79. So I was like, okay, good. I think that's pretty solid for CRNA schools. For like the CRNA schools I looked up, like the GPA is around that or a little lower, the average GPA of accepted students. So I was like, okay, I'm pretty good on that front as far as like my nursing school GPA. So once I graduated nursing school, I started immediately working in an ICU. I had worked as a tech in an ICU in nursing school. When I was applying for jobs after nursing school, I actually applied for positions that were not in the ICU that I was working as a tech, just because I kind of wanted a fresh start and I wanted something closer to my mom's house, because that's where I was going to be living. Once I graduated nursing school, I would move back home to help pay off my student debt. But unfortunately, all the ICUs I applied for that were close to my mom's house, like, they were not accepting new grads. You have to have a year of experience, or they were hiring their nurse externs that were already working there. So it was just a struggle. I just remember being so upset, because I was like, oh, like, I'm gonna have to work at this ICU that I've been like working as a tech at for a year, and I just really didn't like working there anyway. So I was like, great, now I gotta work with these same people. But I bit the bullet and just was like, okay, end goal is to become a CRNA, so I just have to do what I have to do. So I asked my boss if I could work as an ICU nurse there at the hospital that I was working as a tech at, and he was like, yeah, you can come work here. It's like, okay, perfect. I just have to like get my year of experience and then I can bounce. So I stayed at a job for a year, worked as an ICU, well, I stayed at that job for 1 year and worked as an ICU nurse. And then once my year was up, I pieced out and went to a job that was closer to my mom's house. Because the job that I was working at as a nurse, as an ICU nurse, was an hour away from my mom's house. So that commute was ridiculous. but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to get experience and to get to your end goal. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna do what I have to do. I'm gonna sacrifice, have this long commute, work somewhere that I really don't care to work at, but I'm gonna get it done. So after I got my year of experience as an ICU nurse there, I went to a new hospital that was closer to my mom's house, like a 25-minute commute, just a better hospital overall. So I was like, okay, perfect. So when I got to this hospital, that's when I really started preparing myself for CRNA school. My first year of nursing, I just kind of focused on becoming the best nurse that I could be and just learning the ropes. Coming out of school and going into an ICU is stressful enough on its own. So I was like, I don't want to have to like study for the GRE, study for the CCRN. I just was like, I just need to focus on learning how to be a proficient and adequate nurse. Oh, and then also, sorry, I didn't mention it, but after I graduated nursing school, I took my NCLEX probably like a month or two after and passed on the first try. So yeah, study hard for your NCLEX because most board exams are kind of a beast anyway, so just study hard. I studied really hard for my NCLEX and I ended up doing well, so yeah. But anyway, once I started at this new hospital, that is when I really started hitting the ground running, preparing for CRNA school. So my first year at the new hospital is when I focused on the GRE. So I studied for that probably for a good 3 solid months. I would go to a coffee shop on the weekend, would study, my days off I would study. Like I studied hard for that exam, and it's really hard. Well, I thought the GRE was really hard. It's just a bunch of stuff that you haven't looked at in a long time. Math, grammar, well, maybe not grammar, but math, vocabulary, just things like that. But I ended up studying hard for it and ended up getting a 300, which is a very average score, but a 300 is a pretty good score when you're applying to CRNA school. That's pretty much what all the schools are kind of like, okay, this is our cutoff. If they require the GRE, a lot of schools require 300. Or some schools also may just require a 290. But I remember when I got a 300, I was like, okay, that should be pretty good. I should be pretty good to be able to get into CRNA school. And then after I took my GRE, I started studying for the CCRN. And I did that kind of last on my checklist of things I needed for CRNA school because there's also a requirement of like the years you have to be an ICU nurse, or you have to have a certain number of hours of working in the ICU. I forget what it is exactly, but I was like, okay, let me make sure I have like the amount of hours I need, years of experience I need before I take the CCRN. Like I'm not gonna stress about it until I actually can take it. So I studied for the CCRN pretty hard and passed my first try. And I don't know of any CRNA schools that require you to have a certain score. I think most of the time it's just kind of you pass or you fail. Like they just want to know if you pass or fail. So I got all those things done. And then once I had my GRE done, my CCRN done, I started applying for CRNA schools. So this was probably one of the most stressful times for me because you have to, like most schools, you have to send in all your test scores, send in all your old transcripts. Like you have to like compile all these things, get recommendations from leadership, ICU leadership, a CRNA that you know. It was just a whole bunch of things that you have to compile together and then send to a bunch of schools. And I applied for 3 CRNA schools. I had interviews at all 3 CRNA schools, and I got accepted into 2 out of 3 CRNA schools. So that was really good. The first school that I had an interview for is a school that I got accepted into, which was really nice because it kind of took a weight off my shoulder. But even though I was accepted into it, it wasn't the school that I wanted to go to because it was out of state, and I just knew that out of state tuition is usually higher than in-state tuition. So luckily, the last school that I interviewed for was kind of like my dream school, you could say, because it was an in-state school. It was cheaper tuition. I would be able to go home on the weekends if I wanted to. So I was like, please, God, let me get into this school. I did end up getting into it, which was so awesome. I was so thankful for it. So the interview process for the CRNA schools that I applied to and interviewed at, 2 out of the 3 of them weren't too bad. The first one I interviewed at, I had to fly there. I flied in the same day and then I left the same day after, but I flied in, and then my interview was with 3 of the people that were either like a program director or professors in the program. I interviewed with them and they asked just personal questions, asked me about myself, why do I want to go to CRNA school? And then after the interview, you actually take like a little paper quiz. They give you, I think, 10 minutes to do a paper quiz, and it's questions about like anatomy, physiology, things like that, which was nice because I like that I didn't have to answer questions. I didn't have to be asked questions and answer them like immediately. Like I was able to like sit down, have a piece of paper and think about my answers, which is really nice. It took off a lot of stress. I really appreciated that interview. So that was awesome. The next school I interviewed to, I also had to fly to that state, and I stayed, I think, like 2 days because my friend who I went to college with lived in that area, so I stayed with her and hanged out with her. But that interview was definitely one of the harder interviews. I didn't get into that school, but that interview, they asked maybe 2 personal questions, and it was maybe like 10 people at like a rectangle table, like all sitting around, and they like drilled you on questions about train of 4, paralytics, drugs, and it was just like they were just shooting you with questions, and like your anxiety's already high, and I was like missing questions, and then my anxiety was building. I was just like, this is just sucking. So I didn't get accepted there, but that was okay because I already had the other school that I interviewed at already was accepted into it. So I was like, okay, you know what? If I got anything out of this, it was more interview practice for the interview that I'll have in my home state to the school that I really want to go to. And then I also got a trip to see my friend out of it. So I was like, you know what? It's not too bad. But then the actual school that I got accepted into was my home state school that I really wanted to go to. And so the interview at the school in my home state, which was like my dream school, it was a more relaxed interview. Like we came in that day, they kind of had us in a big group of people. Maybe there was like the 15 people getting interviewed that day. We were all like kind of in a room. They provided like a small little breakfast with like pastries, orange juice and stuff like that. And then they had like a PowerPoint slideshow that kind of like talked about the program, talked about like the previous classes scores when they came into the program, talked about our scores, like everybody that was getting interviewed, what our GPA was, like the average GPA, the average GRE score, which was nice for me because when I saw like the average GPA of people getting accepted, the people getting interviewed and the average GRE of people getting interviewed, my scores were kind of like at or above the level. So I was like, okay, like give me a little bit of confidence before actually going to the interview, because I was like, well, this is kind of nice. This is kind of nice. So that interview there was really awesome. They didn't ask any questions about drugs or clinical questions. They just asked about like, why do you want to go into the program? Why do you want to become a CRNA? Like all that kind of stuff, which put me at ease, and it was just awesome. So yeah, that's kind of my journey to become a CRNA. So if you're watching this video and you are in nursing school or working as a nurse and thinking about going back to school to become a CRNA, make a checklist of all the things that you want to get accomplished, your GRE, your CCRN. Try to be the best applicant you can be when you're applying to school. I wouldn't recommend being an applicant where you're like, oh, I hope I get in. When I was applying to CRNA school, I pretty much was like, not to sound cocky, but I was like, I know I'm probably going to get into at least one program I applied to. My GRE was like decent enough. My GPA was high. I had a good amount of years of ICU experience. I had 3.5 years of ICU experience. So I just kind of set myself up to pretty much know, like, unless I just screw up the interview, I am probably going to get accepted somewhere. So kind of set yourself up onto that path where you pretty much have done all the work, you've worked as hard as you can, and you have a high possibility of getting into at least one program you applied to. So that's pretty much my journey to becoming a CRNA. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and keep working hard, and I hope that you eventually become a CRNA because it's a pretty awesome profession. Bye.